Hi there, welcome back. I'm Ben. Let's get to the review. DJI Avata review. First impressions. Holy shit, there's a lot in the box. Right out of the gate, I'm just going to say that DJI's packaging is fairly nice, but there's just been mountains of plastic here, and a lot of these could have been wrapped in paper just as well, and the thought of millions of these going everywhere kind of makes me cringe. I said it about the Sony XM4s and I'll say it again, this amount of plastic packaging is a real boner killer. Tech companies need to lead the charge in moving to sustainable packaging. Because of how obviously this device needs a carrying case, it's also really shocking to me that they didn't offer to bundle this purchase with the Carry More bag that they already sell. Also, holy charging stuff, Batman. There's a lot of things to charge, and as a photographer who already has this problem, I have to say I am a little bummed about this. But I actually have a very cool idea for a charging experience, and if you'll humor me, I'll get to it in a minute or two. My final impression is that this drone has a lot of parts, and if you lose one of those parts, the whole setup becomes useless. I really think we should be building klaxons or some kind of finding technology into these devices because they are important and you really can't afford to lose a part, especially if this drone is a part of your livelihood. Alrighty, let's get into the general design and hardware. I really love the way the propellers quiver when it comes alive. It's very cyberpunk / biomech kind of vibes. It's really cool that DJI has also got a map in the app of the no-fly zones. This map also details the kinds of restrictions and conventions that relate to each zone. It's very informative and it's a really great idea, especially given that this device in some places requires a license to use. As far as getting files off of the device goes, I kind of love the way you don't have to have the battery of the drone connected to it to remove files. That's really handy. What isn't really handy is the way that the cartridge slot is slotted between the propeller blades. I was scared to test this, but I'd like to think that DJI has put into place some kind of protocol to ensure that the device will not run when that cartridge slot door is open. Either way, it's kind of awkward and they should find a better place to put the cartridge slot. Next, let's talk about flight intelligence. So this particular DJI drone comes out of the box with the ability to land itself, which is really cool. So when it's low on battery, it'll seek out the place that it took off from and land again. This feature worked really great until it didn't. Out of the 3 or 4 times that I used the self-landing feature, it only flew itself into the branches of a tree once, which I'm gonna be honest was super nerve-wracking. The drone itself was actually okay, but it's such an obvious mistake and such an anxiety-inducing experience that I've decided not to trust the self-landing feature anymore, so that is a bit of a problem. To its credit, the drone itself was totally fine, and I flew it the next day. Without the propeller guards, however, it probably would have broken off all its propellers, and DJI only gives you 2 extras, so there's that. Let's talk about manual flying. The controller is remarkably intuitive. I like how simple it is. It's basically just a joystick with no base. Once you play around with the controller for a little bit, you get the general gist of how to work it, and it really just gets easier and easier. It's worth noting that you can choose not to fly with the goggles, and also that this works quite well. Having said that, I did fly it in first-person view, and I really enjoyed this. I'll talk more about my face shape and the goggles, but overall the experience was a positive one. I'm kind of shocked that it only lasts about 30 minutes. Depending on how aggressively you fly this drone, it might actually last less than that. And I'm not a videographer, but this is kind of a deal breaker for me. Because if I did intend to use this to make and sell footage, I would be kind of bothered by having to change the battery every 30 minutes, which when you're flying goes by remarkably quickly. Having said that, the DJI has made it possible to buy as many batteries as you like if you buy the Fly More package. And if you do buy that package, they'll even throw in a battery charging hub, which is kind of a boring, expensive consolation prize, I guess. Which brings me to my next important point, batteries. Something which I would have loved to have seen is each device charging off of the same kind of battery pack. Imagine your drone needs a ton of emergency power and your goggles barely even sip at the power that's available. In this case, you could feasibly swap out the drone's battery, which is low enough to be unsafe, but not low enough to be unusable by the goggles. Or you could just do a capitalism, and buy 2 more batteries at $125 a pop. I guess I just feel that because you have to buy 3 batteries anyway, it would be really cool if they could just be used interchangeably. I know it might make the motion controller's package a little more bulky, but let's be honest, I've never had a problem with a bulky package. Also, at one point I was playing with the headset and I had to leave in a hurry. When I got home, I found out that my headset was completely dead, and it turns out that when it's powered down properly, it has a very long battery life. I'm annoyed, however, that the headset doesn't appear to have an automatic power down protocol. The controller and the drone both have this feature, so it's really weird that they didn't do the same for the goggles as well. Let's talk about charge time. So the controller and the headset have lasted for multiple flights, and at the time of writing this, I've done 2 full flights and the headset and controller batteries are still mostly full. I tried charging the drone battery in the field off of my laptop, and it looks like we haven't even charged 1 bar after 40 minutes. But if you can find a wall outlet, you can charge in about 40 to 45 minutes to full battery. Also, charging these things is a bit of a process. It strikes me, however, that this device doesn't have a carrying case, as mentioned before. So, I actually have the perfect solution. Imagine a badass cyberpunk suitcase, a launch pad. How cool would it be if there was an optional suitcase add-on and the suitcase charges all your devices at once? You just plug it in. And it has its own battery so that you can charge on the fly, pardon the pun. How fucking cool would that be? They could also, maybe put a homing tag on the launch pad so it doesn't, fly itself into a tree when it's low on power. Next, let's talk about the camera. The only thing that might be considered a little too intuitive is that the eye of the camera points wherever the controller does. So if you're going up, you're looking up. And again, if we take into account the idea that these are meant to be primarily used with goggles, you can see the logic here. It's a good idea. Having said that, I'd like to know if there's a more advanced mode where I can control the camera gimbal and the drone separately. Filming on this is otherwise pretty simple. There's a record button on the side of the motion controller, and from there it's quite simple. As far as smooth filming goes, honestly, I think that this is something that would be quite easy. The footage that I have from the drone, however, which you can see here, is honestly a little bit shaky, but I think that's mostly because I was just having way too much fun flying the drone as opposed to filming. Next, let's talk about the goggles. I've been having a lot of trouble getting the display to be perfectly clear. I was eventually able to get it to be usable, but having seen my face a lot, you guys know, of course, that I have a giant nose, and I think I just have the wrong face shape. That said, it would be safe to say that the goggles are remarkably well made, and of course, DJI being based in Shenzhen, I have to wonder if maybe they just couldn't conceive of such a large and towering, majestic nose as mine. So, I can wear the headset, but honestly, I have not been able to make the image look as clear as it probably should. Having said that, the focus and IPD adjustments are really easy to use, and if my face were not so horribly disfigured, I imagine it would have been at least tolerable. Summary. Ultimately, I think that this is just an extremely cool device, one which could be even used to generate income. It's easy to use and it's really fun to fly, and I think its sticking points are limited to the flight time for the drone as well as the hassle that charging is. Ultimately, I don't really think I can tell you if you should or shouldn't buy this because it's kind of a specialty device, and it really comes down to what your specific needs may or may not be. Hopefully, some of what I've said may be useful to you. Okay, if you watched this far, you should probably subscribe. It's free for you and it helps me out a lot. More than that, engage, do the commenting and the liking because again, it helps me so much. Lastly, thank you so much for watching. This is BRBTG, I'm BRB, and as always, I'll be right back.